Da, 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 da. Come on, it says that it's offline. Nope, something's whirring around. I do think we are live. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Friday. We have finally made it to the end of this very long week. Happy coding, and I hope your week has been well. It's been well. I hope it's been good. Today, in this stream, we are... well, I don't really know how I can explain this. I don't know... Well, I mean, I don't know how to actually implement this thing that we're going to be doing today. We're going to be building the hydration for the invoice and the invoice item entities. Now, this is an extremely complicated piece of logic because of the nestedness within it. Yesterday, we dealt with the hydrations for the customer and the status tables. They are the tables that aren't necessarily associated directly to another table. It's the invoice table that is associated to the customer table, the status table, and many invoice items. And it's that complication that we're going to be looking into today, or we'll at least start looking into today. I need to build out, of course, the basis for these things, for the invoice item and the invoice. So we'll work on that, and then we'll work through the connection. I think, though, just to sort of refresh my memory, I'm going to go through the code, and I'll explain what the complications are. So, I was playing around with this morning, bringing up, I had a bit of an error here because I forgot to evaluate my shell, but that's done now. So, the complications, if I scroll down here, let's move that over there so I can actually see what I'm doing. It's always good. So, the complications. So we have these entities, right? We have these entities that we've created, and it's a fairly straightforward affair. We have the invoice, we have the invoice item, and we have the status. Okay, and we have the customer, of course. The customer is not linked at all to the invoice from the customer's perspective, nor is the status. It's not linked to the invoice at all from the invoice from the status's perspective. Yet the invoice has a customer and a status and a series of items. So this is the linkages here. This is what I'm talking about. So when we were dealing with the hydration, if I went back to the hydration here, what we were sort of envisaging is in the status hydrator, we would get a data, a variable data, which would hold the raw values from the database for each particular row within the status table, depending on the query, of course. And then what we would do is we would hydrate. Excuse me. We would hydrate the status entity. We would instantiate a new entity, and then we would hydrate that entity based upon the values that are held within the data array. Okay, and then what I did is I had a hydrate rest, which will hydrate the rest of the things. These are the common things between all of the entities. And if I go into that, I'll just demonstrate. These are creation, updation, created, updated, and obviously the ID. Okay, so that's that. And we also did the customer hydration, which is following a fairly similar process. But what I would like to do today is work on the invoice and the invoice item hydration. Now, these are going to be, we'll work through them as a standalone thing first. So we'll create the hydrators like this for each one of those things. The trouble comes when I want to hydrate the customer entity from the invoice. So, for example, when I do a select all from invoice where ID is equal to 1, for example, or 2, or whatever the ID of the invoice is, That's going to return, if I go to the MySQL, if I go to the schema here, that's going to return the ID of the customer ID. It's also going to return the status ID. So what I would like to do is, in that sort of hydration mechanism, is also hydrate those tables too. So that means making another call to the database to get the status that corresponds to that invoice, and another call to the database to get the customer that corresponds to that database. Plus, I would like to make individual queries to get all of the invoice items that relate to that invoice, and therefore I should end up with a whole invoice entity that contains a hydrated customer, a hydrated status, and an array of hydrated items. This is where I want to be. Okay, that would be awesome. Getting there is a challenge, and this is the challenge that I'm trying to work through in my mind, how to do this. So I do apologize, because today is going to be a little bit hit and miss. Bit like any other stream, to be honest. So what we're going to do first of all is, like we've always done, is we're going to actually start building some tests first to test out our ideas in a sort of a TDD kind of manner. So we're going to create some hydrators, but we're going to do these for the invoice and the invoice item. First of all, what I need to do, of course, is set up my branch. So we're just going to do git branch. Where am I? What's going on? I'm on the master branch. Okay, I did push up those changes last night that I did yesterday, so they are now in the Git master branch. If we go over to the browser, which I hope I've set up, yes I have, and we take a look at this. This is thank you very much, I can't pronounce it, Mitz Alex, for starring this repo. That's very kind of you. Thank you. So if we go into the repository, if I can find this repository, there we go. Okay, so this is where we're at. And if we go into the issues, the issue we are going to be working on is probably 35. It's going to be 35 and 36. I'll probably do them together. But this is where we're at. Okay, so that's cool. So I'm going to do a git checkout. Oops, let me show you what I'm doing. Git checkout -b, because we want to create the branch. This is 35, and we're going to do invoice hydrator. Okie dokie. Okie dokie. Okay, so we're going to just copy the status test, and we're going to call this invoice test. In fact, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to work. Yeah, sorry, I'll just do the invoice for now. I was going to do the invoice item first because it's a little less manic, but we'll do this. It doesn't make a difference, I suppose, in what order I do this. So invoice tests, I will change that to invoice, and we'll test the hydration. Okay, so these are the fields. I do apologize. These are the fields that are in the database. So these should represent the field names of the table within the invoice. So the fields that we're going to be playing with, if I scroll up here to MySQL, open that up, go into the schema, go into the invoice. Here we go. I'm just going to, for my own sanity's sake, I'm going to copy all of this to about there. That doesn't matter. And then I'm going to bung this into the test. So in there. Okay, let's bring that out so I can make full use of the screen. Goodbye, all the way down. There we go. Okay, so this is the contents of the invoice, just so I've got some reference to play with. Okay, so we have the ID. We also have a reference, so we're going to grab that. So this is, I'm going to do invoice -001 or something daft like that. We then have a total. Total is going to be a decimal place, so that's going to be something like 299. I don't know. It's a decimal, so it needs to be like that. And then we have the VAT, which is going to be the same. I don't really know what the VAT of that would be, so I'm just going to make it up. Again, it's a decimal, so I'm going to just do 125. And then we have the customer ID and the status ID and all of that jazz. So what do I do there? I think for now I'm just going to leave them as is. We do have the date updated. I'm going to do the date created as well. Why do I not have the date created on this test? This is weird. Date created. We'll pass that through. Marvelous. Okay, so now I can get rid of this because I was just using that as a check. This is going to be invoice hydrator. We're going to pass in that data that we've just passed through. We want to make sure that this is a instance of an invoice like that. And we want to make sure that 1 is equal to get ID 1. And we want to make sure that this reference is the reference that we pull out. So that's probably called get reference, I would imagine. And then we want to make sure that the totals are the same. So we want to do 299 is so this is get total, and we want to make sure that yeah, those are in, but we want to also do the VAT as well, which I think, yeah, 125. That's ludicrous VAT, but whatever. 125. So this would be get VAT. Now, is it uppercase or lowercase? I can't remember. The unit test will tell us. Okay, so there is that. That's pretty cool. I will remove all of these things. Let's just change that to be invoice hydrator. Invoice hydrator. I haven't created it yet, so the test will fail, which is good. But obviously, we do check the test just in case it doesn't fail. It should fail. So we'll do that now. So let's bring that up. Whoop. And let's go to... we want to go inside the container, don't we? So we want to do a reverse search, and it's bash. There we go. And we want to do a... I pulled these down and bring them up back so it won't be in my history. So I think it is vendor bin. I should really create an alias to all of this. Code sept, and then it's run unit. And I called the group -g hydrator, but I want to focus on this test. So hydrator invoice. So seen this before. That's just a way of grouping the tests together. Yep, that has failed. This is good because the invoice hydrator doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and build it, shall we? Bring this out. Whoop, zoop, zero. Okay, and then go into where are we? Where does this go? Nobody knows. Here we go. We're going to copy the status. We're going to call this invoice. Okay, add. Bingo. And then we're going to just do invoice. That passes in the data. That's going to be a new invoice. Let's bring that out. So just to give it a little bit more room, that's going to return an invoice. Okay, so then we do set. We got set reference. So we have a reference. We have set. We don't have set status, not yet. We have set total, of course. And we also have set VAT. Is it uppercase VAT or not? Yes, it is. So that should work. That's good. So that's VAT. What else did we have? Was there anything else? There was obviously the status and the customer, which we'll deal with soon, I hope. And then we have the date created and all that jazz. So that's fine. Let's just remove all of this funkiness. And then we hydrate the rest. So that's the basic fundamental part of the invoice without the customer, without the status being built. Okie dokie. So let's just run those tests and make sure that that passes. Yep, it does. It passes. That's all good. Let's just make sure that they all pass. I'm just going to remove that and go to the group of Hydrator. There should be 3 tests here. Yeah, they've passed. Amazing. Okay, so what I think I can do at this point is I can put that back. I could, I suppose, exit this, and I could do a git status. I'm going to push this up to the GitHub repo. So this is git add. We're going to add the src, and this is, I could just do that, and then I could do git, because these are the only 2 changes that are in. Whoops, nope, sorry, git add. There we go. If I did git status again, I should see them all. Come on, there we go. So now I can do a git commit -m. We're going to bung this in, and we're going to say created or added invoice hydrator. Okay, that's all good. I'm going to do a git pull. No, I'm not. I'm going to do a hub pull request -p, because it's going to push it up. That should bring me into a Vim thing. That's all good. I believe this is come on, Vim, go into insert mode. This, I think, is issue. So this fixes issue -35. And then we're going to come out of this, and we're going to come out of Vim. Bye-bye. Push that up. Wonderful. Let's go back to the browser. We should see that now as a pull request, which it is. I don't know why that was appended to the title, but it is. Oh well. Merge. Confirm. Marvelous. So then we can go to the issues. I should close it, to be honest. I haven't really connected these up well, have I? So this is 35. Close the issue. Bye-bye. And then the next one we're going to deal with is the InvoiceItem hydrator, which is 36. So we'll do a git jerk out of master, and then we'll do a git pull to bring in those changes into master. We're going to do a git checkout -b, and we're going to bring in, what is it, 36. So 36, oops, sorry, you're not seeing this. There we go. 36. And this is invoice item hydrator. Boom. And then we're going to just, no, that's fine. But then we'll build this out. So the invoice item hydrator is fairly the same. It's actually more similar to the status and the customer, to be honest. We'll start with building the unit test as usual. I'm firing through all of this stuff because the real nuts and bolts of all of this is how they all hang together. So I want to try and get to that point at least. So, you know, I am trying to muscle my way through. Okay, so invoice item, test hydration. Let's have a little look at what is on the table for that. So we go into the invoice, that's it, this one here. This one here, yep. Just making sure I've got the right one. So we're going to grab all of this stuff, bring it back down into the test, invoice item test. I'm just going to create that just so I have something to play with. Okay, so first thing is the ID, then we have the reference again. So this is invoice-item 001. We have the unit price, which is a decimal, which is fine. I'll just change that. And then we have the units. That is an integer. So we're going to do, say, 50 at 8, 7. There we go. And then we're going to do total, which is all of that combined. Total. That's what I want. I'm sure it was total. I just had a brain freeze then. Okay, so that's what, 350, something like that. And then we have total invoice ID. We're not going to worry about the invoice ID yet. And then we have the created and the updated and all that jazz and all that lovely good stuff. So, okay. So we're going to run this through the invoice item. Whoops. Like that. Let's change the namespace. So this is invoice item. This is invoice item. Wonderful. And then we have the checks. So we have the entity, we have the ID, we have the invoice hyphen item. And then we check that the units are the same. Well, we'll do the unit price. That is, was that decimal? I think it was. We should really check can't say it. That is a decimal. So let's just make something up. Let's just do 285. Whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, this is an invoice for anything, right? So don't get your knickers in the twist. Units are a integer, so that should be, we're going to do 7. So that is get total. This this is get units. This is get unit price. And then after that, unit price and units, we have total. So we grab the total I have is 350. Obviously, this isn't the case, but just for this test, get total. Wonderful. Okay, and then that does all of that other magic and jazz and stuff. So yeah, total was a decimal. Whatever, that's fine. Let's close that up. Invoice item test. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Invoice item. Okay, let's just run these tests. So let's go back into the container, which is not that, this. And we can run this invoice hyphen item. That should fail, which it does because I haven't created the hydrator yet, which is good. So you can see this is kind of like the flow, the way I kind of develop these things. It's sort of slowly building up the code, bringing in confidence as I build it as well. So we're going to copy you and we're going to bring this into here. So this is invoice item hydrator. Yes, I do want to add that to my, whoa, too many windows. There we go. Invoice item. There we go. Okay, my screen just went a little bit cray-cray. Cray-cray. I apologize. I will never use that word again. So then we go down here. We open up invoice. Who do I think I am? A teenager? That will return an invoice item. Yay! No. Invoice item. Then we have, so we have all of this other good stuff. So we have the reference still. We have the total still. What else do we have? We have the set unit price. So that will be unit underscore price. E. And we also have set. Apparently we have a description. Apparently. Where did that come from? Obviously there needs to be a description in an invoice item. Maybe I haven't included that. So this is units. If I can spell. Yeah. You know when you look at a word for a long time and it's like that just shouldn't be the case. Well, that's what I just had with units. That you didn't look right. But then I'm dyslexic, so every word looks a bit funny. So, set reference, set total, unit price, units, and then we hydrate the rest of them. I'll deal with description in just a second. I'm wondering if I haven't actually added this to... No, I do have description in here. I must have just left it off in the test. Let's go back to that. Yeah, I did. I apologize. Let's put that back in. Whoops. So this is, I don't know, let's just call this development time. Development time. Or coding time or something. Then we'll add a check. So there's that. Boom. So this is now get. Yeah, it was there. Description. Boom. Okay, cool. All right. Fire this up. Ooh. So there's a problem. So I expected this, but I actually got that. Huh. Okay. First of all, am I actually setting it? No, I'm not. That's probably why. We'll set it just before the reference. Set description. See, this is a good... I mean, you might be thinking, you're testing too much and you're doing, too much work for too little, output. But it's these things, right? It's these things these little things. I totally forgot about that. And I think, that to me, I mean, and again, what's going on here? What's all this about? Failed to assert that 350 is identical to 300. Ooh. This is because it's a decimal, isn't it? So it's going to come out with a dot, of course. So this should be 30, even though you put in 350 there. But that's because it's a decimal. Yeah, there we go. And let's just make sure that all the hydrators work. Bingo. Let's just make sure that all the tests work, all the unit tests at least. Wonderful. Okay, that's all good. Okay, so let's just commit this back up. Let's do all those things. Now I keep forgetting, right, that I'm in a container, and I keep doing my git commits in the container, and it's very annoying because when I get to the point where I do a push, it's like, I don't have details. So I need something. I need some sort of way. Maybe I'm looking for a solution. One of the solutions that I can think of is when I jump into a container, the terminal changes color or something. The prompt changes color just to inform me that I'm not actually on my host machine. So if anybody out there knows of a way to do that, then I would be so grateful if you could point me in that direction of how to actually set that up. Heck, I might even do it so the host machine is different rather than the container. That way I'm only changing the host machine rather than the container. If I can, I would love to do that. That would be fantastic. But anyway, I digress. We need to do a git. We need to do, what are we doing? Git status, that's what we're doing. And I need to add these things. So git add src and also tests. So if we do the git status again, we should see that they are all there. And then if we did excuse me, git commit -m, -m, whatever you want to call it. And the message is adding InvoiceItem hydrator. And then we do a git pull request it's a hub. It's not a git hub pull request. Again, if there's someone out there who knows how I can make hub and git work in the same way, then let me know, because that trips me up too. Hub pull request and passing in all of those things. That's all good. Up we go. So now I create this this Vim thing. This fixes hash 36. And let's and also closes hash 36 too. Let's see if we can do those together. Up she goes. Okay, let's do that. Let's go into the browser. Let's have a little look at what we've just done. So it fixes and it closes. I think before I didn't put a space between a new line between the title and the description, which is why it was on the title. Confirm the merge. Awesome. Delete the branch. Goodbye. And then we should now, hopefully that has now, yeah, that's closed that. So if I go back to the code, we should, if we go back to git branch master and pull that down, sorry, git checkout master, obviously, and then go do a git pull. That's in there. And if I did a git branch, we should see that we still have the local branches, which we can remove. So we can do git branch -d just to tidy up the room. So it's 35. Unfortunately, if I would love it if there was a autocomplete. I need to type the whole thing out. Invoice hydrator and 36, which is invoice item hydrator. Wonderful. Just to make sure that they are all gone. Okay. So that was knocked out in about half hour, which I'm fairly happy about. I mean, obviously, if I wasn't streaming, I would have just done that in quick time. But next is the fun stuff, because we need some way of linking the invoice to the invoice item. So this is where I take a cup of my tea and I think, and I probably write a load of code that I'm not going to use. Okay, so the reason why I haven't done the connection within the hydrator itself is because of the single responsibility principle. I want the hydrator to only hydrate what it's got. I don't want the hydrator to go off and hydrate and to fetch other things. The hydrator should only hydrate what is sent to it. There needs to be something else above the hydrator, which will then give that hydrator the other bits and pieces. Oops. So, in saying that, perhaps we need to have another layer above these, which has the intelligence that knows that if I want to hydrate an invoice, I must also hydrate a customer, and I must also hydrate a status, and I must also hydrate many invoice items. So I'm thinking maybe we have a layer above this, and there might be people out there going, what on earth are you doing? Why can't you just use objects, standard objects, standard classes, I should say, rather than, converting an array to an object? Well, I was thinking about this morning when I got up. I was like, this is going down a road that I don't necessarily need to go down. But the course teaches this. I haven't actually mentioned this. This is going to teach object-oriented programming using PHP. So I think that this is a very good example of how you can have many objects that are linked or associated together using dependency injection. Because, so it's dependency injection, but it's not through the constructor, it's through a bunch of setters. So if we take a look, for example, of entity types. If we had a look at the invoice here, we have the ability on somewhere down here, somewhere is, there we go, set status. So here we're actually setting an object, set status. And really I should change that parameter to be status, because you can only set the status, that you can't set the status to anything else other than the status. And also, for example, we have the checks for, if I can scroll up, add item. So this is probably a better example because we're actually passing in an InvoiceItem object and we are adding that to the items array. So we are injecting this dependency upon this class through the power of just adding it to an array, really. But we also have this method in here that checks the class. So this is does items contain, which I believe, have I put it up here? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how the PHP Storm has ordered this. If I've got it to order it, let's just open that up. So this is checking this is looping through the items, and then it's comparing that object, which is item, to the object that we've got here to the object within the array. So this is an object comparison. So that's kind of why I want to do it like this, because we are using this as a training exercise. Once this system has been built, what I'll do is I'll rip out a couple of these things and I'll rebuild them in the course, and I'll explain, why I think these certain aspects have been architected in such a way. The architecture has to be decided before any of that happens, and this is what I'm trying to achieve on this stream. And this is the latest fork in the road, I suppose you can call it. It's sort of, how do I get from the hydration? Once, say, for example, I do a select all of invoice, for instance, right? How do I then go ahead and actually hydrate the other bits and pieces? Now, we could create a mapping. Like I said, it needs to be a layer of intelligence. So I think first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create myself an issue. And I'm just going to, this is just going to be connect. Let's do the status first, because that's probably the easiest. Connect status entity. Connect status entity to invoice entity. Yeah, and then I'll put in here create layer above hydrator that connects the invoice to the or connects the status to the invoice, connects the status to the invoice, and then this will fetch the status that is linked to the invoice. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, let's just number these things. So 1, we want to hydrate the invoice. 2, we want to fetch the status that is linked to the invoice. 3, we want to hydrate status. 4, we want to connect hydrated status to hydrated invoice. Create layer above hydrations that connect this So I'm going to just change this. Create. I'm going to call it mapping layer. It's probably not the right word. Mapping. Create mapping layer. Okay, whatever. We'll do this. We'll work on the status and invoice. Invoice. There we go. So I'm going to submit that. Oops, that's not right, is it? That's not marked down. There we go. Okay, so they're kind of the steps. So that we've done the first step. We have the ability to do the second step, and we've done the third step. It's kind of like this step that is the crux of it all. And we want to try and, if you see, this is kind of like almost in a recursive manner, because you hydrate the invoice, hydrate the status, and now you need to connect the two. So I need some sort of intelligent layer that goes, well, the invoice also needs a status. So okay, let's build that out. Let's go back into the code. Let's write some code. Okay. So okay, we're gonna follow on the mapping. I think I won't do TDD yet because I'm not too sure how this is gonna pan out. So I'm just gonna throw some things on the page. But first of all, let's just get out master. So let's do a git checkout -b. I can't remember what the thing was. What was it? It was 41. 41. Mapping layer. Okay. So this mapping layer is going to go somewhere between the manager and the hydrator. Could it even be in the manager? Let's just keep it simple and move it outside. I can always put it back in if needed. Okay, so the mapping of, we're going to have the mapping of the invoice. Invoice mapper, that's what we're going to call this. Invoice mapper. Let's just grab that, put that in here, just so I've got a class to play with. So this is app mapper. Is it mapper or mapping? I forget. I've called it mapping. Let's call it this mapper. Mapper sounds better because you're doing something rather than yeah, mapper. Okay. Okay, we don't need to extend that yet. This is going to be the invoice mapper. Let's just remove all of these things for now. Let's remove all of those things, and then we're going to do a public function map. And if we look at the and let's just build out the structure of this. So we have private structure is equal to an array. Okay, this is going to be an associative array. The first one is going to be an invoice. These are all. This is an array of things. We also have the status. We also have the customer. We also have the items. Okay, so these are the things that I need to get when I get the invoice, and this, of course, is going to be an array of an array, right? So that's kind of the structure. So when we do a find one or what a find one by, and we're passing in the manager, we get the data coming back. If, for example, we were to follow this logic through, I think actually what I'll do is I'll just I'll quickly, just for my sanity's sake, because I will create an invoice manager, just to have something to play with in the code. Okay, so we're passing in the ID and we do the find by one. Okay. Is there a way I can say, sort of a dynamic manner that if for each thing in the structure, go and do a find one based on what's given? So I could do something like this. I could do something like, and this is just me thinking out loud here. So we could do we could do ref ID is equal to ID is equal to, sorry, not ID, is equal to status ID, because so we're looking for the reference ID for each one of these things within the invoice. So that would be customer ID. The items would be a little bit different because we would have to do it from the items perspective. So I'm kind of thinking something like this. So for each this structure as table, right? Because these could be the table names. Data. And then, so we're looping through each one of these, and then we can do something like if is set data so that's going to be the table name. Okay, so then we do so then we loop through the table for each. This is getting complicated now. For each data as key. Let's change that to be data set. Oh, this is getting very dirty. Data set for each data set as key as data, right? So now we've created a horrible nest of bees, and then we can do if key is equal to ref ID. So that is the ID on the initial table. Ugh. Let's just take that out. So we're only working on the tables that are associated. So we have that key. So if key is equal to ref ID, we should do this the other way, like that. So if ref ID is equal to the key, then we know that that is well, there's no real if about it, to be honest. So table ID is equal to data ref ID. I want to try and do this in a mechanism that I can just loop through, and then I can just run this on all of the tables all of the time. Let's not worry about items for now, because that's just going to confuse me. Let's just keep this nice and simple, or as simple as it possibly can be. Okay, so now we need to go off and make a query based on that. So if we had the data in the, if we had the, let's say we had, let's say we had an array of invoice data. So this is the raw data from SQL, right? We have that, and we can say, well, we have the so this is table name. We can do if is set in invoice data, and it is that should be table ref ID. So now what we're doing is we've looped over this structure, and then we've looped over that structure and that structure, and we're past. If this is the array of the actual raw SQL, that array would have the customer and the status ID. So we want to check those. Okay, so we want to make sure that that is the case. So if we have that, then we need to go off and actually make a query. And get the mapping for that, and then hydrate it at that point. But this is in a massive loop, and I'm not overly happy about this. We could probably do this better because we don't necessarily need this. We could probably make this a little bit more flatter. So, for example, we could do this. We could do status. So we could do customer and then status. So it is just like that. So we have the table name as the key, and then we have the reference of that. So we now don't need this. So we can do we can remove that out of here. That kind of sits better in my head, I think. Okay, so for this structure, the key is the table name, which is that, and then this is the that would be the ref ID. So there is no need for this, and then we pass in the ID, and then so this is the ref field. It's not even the ref ID. This is the ref field. Wonderful. So that becomes then. Let's just remove this whole if statement. This then therefore becomes the ID. ID is equal to that. Wow, I've just kind of made something extremely complicated and then I'm sort of like imploded on myself. I think I need a cup of tea. Ugh. So this is why I like doing these streams, because you know, it shows the thought process. It's not the same thing as like on my courses that I've done for Manning and Pack publications, where I've already thought of this, and so what I'm going to show you is this working example. This here is very different. This is like trying to show you an insight into how my brain works, which is a scary thought. I'm not sure why I should be putting this on live, but you know, I do hope that this does help people when they you know, think of all of this. I mean, this is the thing. What I just did there is I thought through the structure, and then you know I blew it up to a point where it was insane, and then I thought again, what are the things that I actually want to achieve here? Well, I want to pull out the name of the table that is associated. I want to pull out the field that I'm referencing, right? And then I also want to pull out the ID that is on that raw SQL. So what I'll just sort of like show you where my head is. So let's go to MySQL and data. No, schema. Invoice. Okay, so the invoice here has these two, customer and status. Okay, so these are the fields that I'm trying to pull out, these two, and I also need to pull out the references, right? So the customer and the status, and so this is what I'm trying to do in this whole mapper type affair. So that will be the raw SQL, or the result of the SQL. So now we have the ID. Woohoo! We have the ID. We have the table name, and we have the field that we wish to reference upon the invoice table. So what do we go ahead? Let's go ahead and do something. We need some mechanism in this map function to then call upon the manager for let's do the status. So let's just work on the status for now, because I know that's in play. So let's just comment that out. The next thing we need to do is somehow we need to inject this status manager somehow inside the mapper. So let's do a public function, and this is all very ad hoc code, right? Construct. This is all very ad hoc. Whoa. So here we have the customer. Sorry, not the customer. The status manager. Do we even need the manager? Maybe we just need to have the repository. No, we do need to have a manager. Okay, so we're going to have the status manager, and we are going to set that as a property. So we are going to do this status manager is equal to status. Yeah, we don't actually need to have the table name, do we? Because because at this point we could do this. So let's say there was only one. We could do this status manager, find one by, and then passing in the ID. Boom. And then obviously that needs to be changed for the various managers that we put in play. So we don't actually need to have the tables. We just need to have the managers. What are the managers that are referring to? And this would come out with the hydrated thing. Now I can already think that this is going to get nasty when it's trying to hydrate other bits and pieces as well. Crikey. Okay. Because really what we want to be calling is another mapper rather than another manager. Yeah. Damn it. My brain is hurting. Maybe we're going about this a little bit too complicated. Maybe we're blowing this well out of proportion here. If this wasn't the manager, if this was the repository, do I have the repository? Yeah, but I haven't called it that, and that's a pain. So let's say this is status repo. So maybe we go through the repository rather than the manager, because that is going to return. That should return an array, really. So this will be invoice data. Sorry, status data. And then we would do something like status hydrator, hydrate, passing in the status data, and then okay, so we got the invoice data here. We're going to pass in, we're going to do entity or invoice is equal to new invoice. Okay, and then we're then going to do invoice. So that creates the entity. We're going to do invoice. Oh, no, we're going to do invoice hydrator. We're going to hydrate the data, the invoice data that we've got from the raw SQL. So that will actually just return a new invoice like that. Whoops. And then at this point we can do so that will become the status that we've got, and this therefore will become invoice set status, passing in the status, which I can't spell. Something like that. Something like that. So, which means that all of these things are going to have to be very abstract if I was to do it like this. I mean, I could hard code it. I could hard code it so it's not actually in a loop. So we could do status data. Let's just open that up. So this would be customer data. Passing in customer repository. And then this private status repo would be this private customer repo. Like so, yeah. And then we do customer repo find by one. Oh, hang on, that's not right, is it? That should be customer. This should be we don't have the manager anymore. Status, type status. Yeah, we need to use that and have that as a type customer. Hopefully that's been built already. No, it hasn't. Okay, of course. So let's just quickly build that through. So that would be the customer repository. Where are we? Managers, repositories. Let's just copy that and push that in. Yaha. Okay, we've got all the other jazz. That's cool. Okay. Then what we do in, where are we? Mapper, invoice mapper. We're passing that through, so we have these two repositories pass through. We're going to put that back in, and then. So let's say there's some mechanism here that works out that this is a status and this is a customer. So we do customer find one, and then we do customer hydrator hydrate. This becomes the customer table, this becomes the customer, and then we do set customer, and then that becomes the customer. Okay. Okay. So this code is terrible. It's absolutely appalling because we're duplicating things all over the place, and this isn't scalable at all. Just imagine that there is many of these things in play here. So we can use some we can play around with some design patterns, I guess, on how we can actually get this to run. But essentially, this is kind of where I kind of want to be. And then obviously we need to work out what on earth we're doing with the invoice items, because the invoice items, of course, are not even connected to the invoice through that association. It's the other way around, because the invoice ID is on the invoice item, and obviously the invoice item ID is not on the invoice, because that's just the way the connections work. It goes in the other way. But I know that this application is just for the invoice, but I want to build this in a manner that teaches OOP and design patterns and other bits and pieces. So I think this is a great candidate for that. A great candidate. I just need to work out how on earth to do this. What I ideally would like to have is some sort of array like this that will be able to build out all of this stuff, right? And so all I need to do then is just go invoice mapper and then map, passing in the invoice ID, passing in the invoice data that I've got from the invoice, and then it would go away and map all the bits and pieces. I guess at some point we could have you could have a table that has an ID to another table that has an ID to another table, and you could end up with all of those sort of nested recursions, which would be problematic because you would be doing select queries for each one of these things. And I guess this is the joy of using things like Doctrine, where it does all of these things in the black box. I don't really know how Doctrine works. I don't, in terms of at this point. So this is a bit of a mystery. There is only going to be the customer and the status table, so there really isn't a lot of need to make this complicated. However, this isn't good practice, doing it like this. So, and there might, and I might want to add something to this, and I might demonstrate how one could actually build out a new entity and associate it with this, and make this into a mechanism that you can snap in to do that. Because when you're teaching object-oriented programming, or just teaching in general, it's all right to say this is how you do it, but then you kind of need to back that up with an example of why that was a good way of doing it. Just because it's good practice, well, what does that mean? Just because everybody's doing it and that's the right way to do it, that's not, in my opinion, a good way of teaching someone. You have to show them an example of why it was a good way of doing it, and not only a good example but also a bad example, right? So this is a bad example. This is a bad example of how to do hydration to this degree. For a start, it's not even going to work because this is in a for each loop and it's getting all this stuff. So I'm going to leave this here as just a sort of an example of how I would like it eventually to be set up, in the sense that we loop over the structures and then all we need to do is pull out this. So I guess what I want to achieve, let's remove that for now. Let's think of all of this being, actually, let's bring that back. So let's say, for example, we had data. Actually, what I'll do is I'll copy that. So we have data here. We have repo here. And that's going to have to be on there. Then we have hydrator. Hydrate, passing in the data. And then what we do is we call some, so that's going to return an entity. And then this is the complicated part. I mean, all of this stuff we can abstract and that's fine, but it's this at this point. So, I mean, that would be cool. That would be linked entity. This would be linked data, which would be in here. Oh, sorry, linked entity would be in there. Linked data would be in there. And then I guess at this point we would have some entity. So this would be like the parent entity. In fact, we should, whoops. Oh dear. There we go. Sorry, my PHP Storm decided to search for the word entity everywhere. I don't think you saw that because the stream didn't catch that. So, yeah, so let's do the whole parent-child thing. So this would be child data. This would be child ID. This would be child entity. That's going off to a hydrator of some description and passing in the child data that we have got from the find1. This would be parent entity. This would be some abstract thing, passing that in to there. So I'm going to have to somehow do something like setter, and you know that breaks. But this is kind of the way I would like this to be sort of abstracted out. So that would child ID would be child ID. And of course, parent entity would become the invoice. That probably would be a callback. I can't even spell child, can I? So I need some way of mapping this together. So I need some way of knowing that this is a repository. I need some way of knowing what the setter is. I need some way of having this hydration mechanism that will take any kind of thing and then hydrate it. So yeah, I think I need to go away and have a little think as to how best to set this up. Of course, we do have the table name, we do have the reference field name, and of course we have the actual ID at the moment. So we could bypass all of this stuff. We could just write some SQL and then pull it out and have done. Because we know all the things that we want to be dealing with, the table, the field names of the invoice, and to pull out the ID. We know all of this jazz. So maybe I am making this more complicated than it should be, but I think I need to go away and review this. But yeah. So that is where I'm going to leave it today, I think, in the stream, because time is not on my side, and I've got other things that I need to get on with today, and I don't think I'm going to be able to solve this without actually giving it some proper thought over the weekend. But I hope you guys do enjoy, and girls, enjoy your weekends. I hope you're not going to code as much as I will, and enjoy the weekend. My weekend is quite busy. I mean, I'm doing this, plus I'm doing other bits and pieces, and it's quite good because the weather has just taken a turn for the worst here in England. So it's it's quite nice to stay indoors when it's raining, obviously. If this was nice and sunny, it would be a different story. So hopefully by next week, and we're talking now probably Tuesday morning at 7:30 BST, I will have some idea of how to deal with this. Perhaps, maybe, I don't know, maybe. And yeah, so I do think that this is going okay. We have done a lot of work today. We have built the hydrators for both the status and the invoice and the invoice item, which were, where are they? Hydration. here. So we have built those out, which I'm happy with, which means now we can then hook together this whole mechanism, which is good. A quick shout out to the sponsors of this live stream. The sponsor is Hostinger. They are sponsoring this channel. And Hostinger is a hosting company, obviously, by their name. I've used them before. They're really good, very affordable, very reliable. At the moment, there is an 82% off if you use hostinger.com/Peter Fisher. And if you use the discount code of Peter Fisher, you get a further 15% off, which is a nuts deal. It's an awesome deal. So if you want web hosting, and I should say that also comes with a free domain. A free domain, 82% off, a further 15% off if you use that discount code of Peter Fisher. It's hostinger.com/Peter Fisher. Do check them out. We are actually going to be building a Gatsby website hosted on Hostinger. I'll be talking through all of that stuff in later streams when I actually get to the point where I can actually set that project loose. And that website will be hosting these videos. We're doing a FreeCodeCamp course at the moment. We're building the application for that to happen. So I'm going to be hosting that, and I'm going to also be hosting these streams that have been developing this application through that website as well. So do stick around if you want to learn how to deploy code and all that stuff. We'll be doing that on the YouTube channel. My cat has just entered the building. Also, check out howtocodewell.fm. It is Friday, which means that we have podcasts today. Today we have Oliver Davies. He's on the show. He's talking about static site generators. So we're going to be talking about all sorts of generators, Sculpin, Gatsby, and other site generators. Sorry, my cat is now faffing about around my feet. Go on. It's raining outside. I've just sort of moved him with my foot, and now I've got a soggy foot. So yeah, do check that out. Last week we had Ines van Essen on, and she was talking about Donate WC, which is the donation website for WordPress WordCamp. So do check that out. It's a very, very good initiative. It's about sponsorship and donations for people going and attending the WordPress WordCamp. So check that out. You can find this on Spotify, iTunes, and all the other good podcasty places. The name is How to Code Well, so do check that out. Or just go to howtocodewell.fm and click on one of those tabs at the top, and you'll be able to listen to it in your favorite podcast player. But for now, though, I'm going to shoot. I've got lots of stuff that I need to get on with. I am a freelance developer, and this is, so this How to Code Well stuff is not what I do on a, for paid work. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry, my cat is complaining. So anyway, happy coding, and I'll see you next Tuesday at 7:30 BST. Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.